So in this lesson, we're going to look at adding mixed numbers. We're going to be doing two methods for adding the mixed numbers. And so that's our first objective is what are the two different ways that we can add numbers that are mixed numbers. The second thing we want to do is we are going to look at what happens when we do add numbers that are mixed numbers and the fraction part is bigger than 1. And that's where we come into having to do what we call regrouping. Okay, so let's look at the first method. And it should be one that's familiar to everyone as far as adding fractions go, because this first method is just not adding mixed numbers at all, but making them into fractions. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take our mixed numbers and we're going to rewrite them as fractions. So here I have 3 2/3, and remember we multiply whole number times denominator, add the numerator. So we have 3 times 3 is 9 plus 2 is 11. Do the same thing over here. 1 times 2 plus 1 makes 3 over 2. Then we rewrite the two fractions with a common denominator, or if we have more than 2, we rewrite all of them with a common denominator. So in this case, I want to know what's the least common multiple of 3 and 2, and because they are relatively prime, it's 6. So that means I have to multiply the 3 times 2 and the 11 times 2, the 2 times 3 and the 3 times the 3. And now I have a common denominator of 6, which gives me 22 over 6 plus 9 over 6. So I'm going to keep the denominator and add the numerator to add the fractions. And now I'm going to rewrite my sum as a mixed number because my problem is about mixed numbers. So remember, to do that, we just use long division. 31 goes into 6 5 times. 5 times 6 is 30, and my remainder is 1. So that means the whole number is 5. Denominator stays as 6. Remainder is the numerator of the fraction. So the sum of 3 2/3 and 1 1/2 is 5 1/6. So just to reiterate, one possible method for adding mixed numbers is to not add mixed numbers, but to make them fractions with a common denominator and then add. Now let's go ahead and look at a second method of keeping them as mixed numbers and adding them. So when we're going to do this method, I actually like to not have the problem written like this. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rearrange this so it's vertical. And that's because just like when I am adding and subtracting decimals, we like to line up the problem about the decimal point. Remember that the mixed number is separating a whole number part from the fractional part. So it's like I'm lining up my decimals. So I'm going to go ahead, and this time when I talk about making a common denominator, I only need to worry about the part that contains the fractions. So I'm going to go just to my fractions first, and I'm going to go ahead and make a common denominator with those. I'm not going to worry about the whole number part at all. So I know that my common denominator has to be 6 from our previous attempt at this. And I know that 2 times 3 gives me 6, so I got to do 1 times 3. And 3 times 2 is 6, so I got to do 2 times 2. So now I'm going to add the fractions together. So it's like kind of like, again, when you're adding decimal numbers, we add from right to left, and so we're going to add the right side of the problem first, which is the fractions. So remember, I add numerators only, so I have 7 over 6 for my fraction. And now I'm going to go ahead and add together my whole number part. Okay, so it's a separate step. So my whole number part is 3 plus 1, which is going to give me 4. And my last thing I want to do is simplify my answer. And so I cannot have the fraction part be improper if I have a mixed number. So what I need to do is I need to do something called regrouping. And so regrouping is to take my fraction part and write it as a mixed number. So again, remember we do long division and look for a remainder. 6 goes into 7 once with a remainder of 1. So that means 7 6 is 1 and remainder 1 over the denominator 6. But remember what this really means is that I had 4 plus 7 over 6. So what I have now is 4 plus 1 and 1 6. So there's this hidden addition sign in between the 1 and 1 6. So when I go ahead and I'm going to add these, that means I'm going to take that whole number part and I'm going to add it to the 4 from my sum. So I have 5 and 1 6 as my answer, just like I got before when I added them like fractions. So let's go over that regrouping again. So the purpose of regrouping is you always do it when the fractional part of a mixed number is greater than 1. It's not simplified. So we go ahead and we convert the fractional part to a mixed number. So again, we do that by doing long division. So 4 goes into 7 once. It leaves me a remainder of 3. So that means I have 5 and 1 and 3 fourths. I got the 3 from the remainder, and the 1 is the whole number. So that's what I have. And now I'm going to go ahead and add that new whole number to my original whole number, 5, and just check to make sure is 3/4 simplified. And it is, because 3 doesn't go into 4. 3 is a prime number, so they are what we call relatively prime. So this would be our answer to regrouping the number 5 and 7/4 to make a correctly formed mixed number. Okay, let's do a couple extra examples. So here we have 11 and 5/8 and 7 and 3/4. So I'm going to go ahead and do this using the method of leaving my problem as mixed numbers rather than converting them to fractions. So first thing is I look only at the fractions and I go ahead and I check to see, do they have a common denominator? And the answer is no. So I'm going to rewrite just the fractions with a common denominator. In this case, 4 does go into 8, so the least common multiple of 4 and 8 is 8. So that's my new denominator. Well, since 5/8 already has it, I don't have to make any changes. I'm going to leave it 5/8. But for the 4, I have to multiply 4 times 2 to get it to be an 8. So I got to do the same thing to the numerator of 3/4, which means multiply 3 times 2. And that gives me 6. So add the fractions together, keep the denominator. 5 plus 6 is 11. Now I go to my whole number part and I add the whole numbers. So I have 11 plus 7. And in this case, 11 plus 7 is going to give me 18. Now I'm ready to go ahead and regroup, and I know I have to regroup because the numerator is greater than the denominator in the fractional part of the mixed number. So off to the side, I go, how many times does 8 go into 11? It goes once, and I have 3 left over. So that means it's 1 and 3/8. So I add the 1 to the 18, giving me 19, and then my remainder over the whole number, or the divisor. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. So I'm going to line up my problem vertically, and I'm going to go ahead and add the fractions together, but I can't add until I have a common denominator. So I'm going to look for the least common denominator of 6 and 4. And remember, a least common denominator is the same as a least common multiple. It doesn't matter which way you call it. So multiples of 6, 6, 12, 18. Multiples of 4, 4, 8, 12. So 12 is my magic number. So I want both to have a denominator of 12. So I knew that 4 times 3 is 12. So I do 1 times 3, which gives me 3. Then I know 6 times 2 is 12, so I'm going to do 5 times 2, which is 10. Now we're ready to go ahead and do our addition. So I'm going to add the fractions, and I'm going to add the whole numbers. So 10 twelfths plus 3 twelfths is going to give me 13 twelfths. 9 plus 2 is going to give me 11. And even though I am giving you problems where we do have to regroup, you don't always have to regroup when you're adding mixed numbers. If the numerator of the fraction part, remember, is less than the denominator, you don't have to regroup. So in this case, since it is over 1, I go ahead and 12 goes into 13 once, subtract, and I have a remainder of 1, which means this is 1 and 1 12. So 11, and remember the 1 gets added to the whole number, giving me 12. And my fractional part is 1/12. So the sum is 12 and 1/12. And of course, 1 over any denominator other than 1 is always simplified. That's all, folks.